Hi there. Welcome to week 2. Glad you could join me. Wow, can you believe we're already almost to the halfway point in our course? I mean, that's what week 2 all represents for me is always just we're at halfway point. So, um, it's a great opportunity to kind of take a look at week 1, see how what things worked, see what things didn't work, what we need to improve upon and how we can get better and all of that good stuff. So I'm sharing with you, I'm going ahead and sharing the lecture quiz answers. I never feel like those are something we should hide. I just go ahead and give them to you. I will give them again at the end of the session. So if you don't have enough time to write them down, I'll share them again at our session. But what I thought we would do is I want to spend some time looking at some of the essay type questions that we might have in the assessment for this week. Because I always view the assessments as vocabulary driven. So they're all about the language, they're all about the kinds of using the terminology that you're experiencing in your readings and in the media that you're watching for our class and kind of putting that cohesively together. So I thought we'd take a look at some of the essay type questions you might see on the assessment for week 2, and then yeah, see how that goes, and we'll integrate as we're doing that. We'll look at some of the vocabulary intensive kinds of things. So let me pull those up for us. Couple of things here I need to maneuver around. So I'm going to stop sharing my lecture quiz. And again, like I said before, I'll share that again at the end so that you can see it. And then also I'm going to mute my video so that we don't take up too much bandwidth here. And let me grab those essay prompt like questions that I have. Those are always good to have. And we'll take a look at some of those. So bear with me just a moment as I pull them up. So I'm going to share in a Word document if you're okay with that. And we'll do some brainstorming. I really like to brainstorm some of the um, types of things that you could write about with a particular prompt, and then also kind of give you some food for thought, I guess is the best way to say it. So I'm going to share a Word document here. And let me make my font a little bit bigger. And almost there. Let me just grab them and throw them in a Word document here. Okay, now let me share with you my Word document. Ta-da, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so let's see. As we discussed this week, researcher bias can influence a research study in unethical ways. To keep this from happening accidentally, it's important to be aware of your personal biases. Write an essay exploring several beliefs, attitudes, and values that are important to you. What are they? How could they potentially affect your research? What will you do to make sure your work is as unbiased as possible? So here, what I'd like to do today is just kind of brainstorm a little bit with you to kind of determine, what kinds of things could you talk about here? And really, please understand this is not a right or wrong. This is a here's some food for thought for you. Um, when I think about beliefs, attitudes, and values, so let's just put that. What are some beliefs, some attitudes, and values that are important to you? The first one that comes to mind for me is family. Family is important. That may be for you, it may not. But again, it's something that you can talk about if it does fall into a category. Um, Beliefs. So maybe some people might say this is about morals. Others may say it is about religion, could be thrown in there. Um, these are kinds of things that are beliefs on how you view the world. Okay, so that's something you could talk about as well. Attitudes that are important to you. These are things where maybe you attitudes that are important may be that you want to avoid negativism, meaning you, okay, let's do that in the positive. Let's be optimistic, right? Maybe that's you. Or maybe there's all kinds of attitudes you could have. Maybe you're optimistic. Maybe you value being hopeful. It's important to you that you have hope. So there's some things there that you could talk about. Now remember, these are not ones that I say, oh, this is the right answer. These are ones that I just brainstormed and thought, well, people might write about this. Okay. Second thing then is, how could these potentially affect your research? Okay. So let's talk about maybe if you chose family is important, right? Well, if family is important and you're asked to research cases of domestic violence, that's a bias you're going to have in there, right? So you can use examples like that if you want. Things that are important to me can affect my research by creating bias. Any of those could affect my research by creating a bias. So I think this is the more important question. What will you do to make sure your work is as unbiased as possible? So if you viewed my session on the discussions for week 2, you saw that I talked a lot about focusing on the numbers. So to avoid, or let's say it in the positive, to remain as unbiased as possible, remember that we have to focus on the data or the numbers and not the feelings. So we talked about in my session with the discussion, the week 2 discussions, that sometimes the news and the media gives us a lot of feelings because that's what sells, right? It's trying to move us to some kind of action. But if we're going to eliminate bias in our research, then we have to focus not on the feelings. We've got to focus on the numbers for the data. We have to let the numbers drive our research and not necessarily the feelings or the stories behind it. Yes, people are, I mean, people are important, but when we're conducting research, we need to focus on just the raw data, not the story of the people behind the data, because the stories are where we get caught up in our biases. And if we're going to do legitimate research that is authentic with its results, then we have to try to minimize those personal biases. And notice I said minimize, not eliminate, because I do believe it is difficult to actually eliminate all biases. Okay, so I hope that gives you food for thought for that essay. Again, just brainstorming some things you could talk about with this one. Let's look at the next one I have here. And again, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so you can see it. So this essay says, to develop most skills, you need to practice. Exactly, right? If you're going to play pro basketball, you're going to have to practice. If you're going to become an excellent chef, you're going to have to practice in the kitchen. Lord knows I need to. Okay, so this is true even for developing the ability to recognize mistakes so you can avoid them in the future. Ooh, ouch, right? Write an essay of at least 100 words, identifying mistakes you've made as a student, what you learned from them, and how you can use this knowledge in your future career. Okay, so again, we're going to brainstorm a little bit about some mistakes that I've made as a student. Okay, So mistakes that I've made. Hmm. Waiting until the last minute to do assignments. Oh, procrastination is real sometimes, right? And there's nothing like waiting until that very last moment to be able to complete an assignment. All right, something else that I have made a mistake is oops, let me spell right. Waiting to get help. Ooh, so this one is one that hits really close to home for me. So I'll tell you a little story. When I was working on my dissertation, I am not a writer. Truth be told, I am not a writer. I don't have a huge background in writing. I can do it, but it is not my strong suit. So when I was working on my dissertation, as you can imagine, that is a huge amount of writing. And I was really, really struggling. Like I felt like I had written everything I could think to write. And yet there was still pages and pages that needed to be written. So I had a friend who ironically was an English teacher. And I just kind of admired some stuff that she was doing. And we were talking one day and I said, "Hey, would you mind helping me?" And she was like, "Well, sure. What do you need help with?" I said, "I don't even know what I need help with, but can you like help me get through this?" And she was amazing. Okay. So call it a tutor, call it a coach, whatever you want to call it. Getting help is a really big deal. And sometimes when we hit a brick wall, we just need to reach out to someone to get some help to get past that brick wall. For me, it was getting a writing coach, and she ended up, yes, we worked a lot together, and she was a friend, but I did pay her the for her time, but it really helped me, right? I wasn't stuck anymore. She helped me to learn how to outline. She helped me to learn how to write and then edit, and it was so so good. So maybe waiting isn't the best way to say that. Maybe it's not getting help. I've made that mistake before. I should have asked for that help when I started the dissertation process instead of when I got to the end, right? When I hit a brick wall. So that's a mistake. Okay. Let's see. Any waiting until the last minute to do an assignment, not getting help. Um, I think those are two that I'll go with. It was just 100 words. I think the two I can talk about those a lot. What are we have we learned? What have I learned from these mistakes? So, the waiting until a last minute to do an assignment, I learned how to break down assignments. Oops, let's see, assignments to smaller pieces. So, and what I mean by here is, let's say, like particularly this week's assignment, there were two parts to it, right? You had a written piece and then you had a bar graph to create. So I learned from the mistake of waiting to the last minute that I would set like smaller goals for myself. Like I would say, okay, I want my written piece done by Thursday this week, and I'm going to finish the bar graph by Sunday. So I broke down the assignment to smaller pieces, and then I was able to kind of set intermediate goals that would then help me to finish the task without waiting until the last minute. Another thing that I did, and I did this with my dissertation, I would take a written assignment. Let's say you needed to do the 250 words for part one of our assignment for this week. And I would say, I'm going to write 50 words on Monday. I'm going to write 50 words on Tuesday. I'm going to write 50 words on Wednesday. And you may be like me, not a writer, but you know what? You can do 50 words in about 15 minutes. And sometimes I'd write those 50 words sitting in my car, waiting to pick up my kids. Or I would write my 50 words right before I went to bed. But I would set those intermediate goals so that then I could finish the bigger task later on, and it kind of all went together. So that's one thing I did learn how to do, is to break down assignments into smaller pieces. And let me add that, and and set intermediate goals. Okay. Now, what did I learn from not getting help? Hmm. Get help early. It will save me time in the long run, right? So my writing coach, once I started working with her, I learned the minute I start having trouble, I need to reach out and I need to get the help that will help. I need to get the resource that will help me, so that I don't waste time just sitting there going, oh, I can't write. Oh, I can't think of anything to write. I just get the help right at the beginning so that I know, and it makes things a lot easier. Okay, let's see then. The last part here is, how can you use this knowledge to help you in your future career? How can this help in my future career? So these things that I've learned about not waiting until the last minute to do an assignment, about not getting help, those translate to my career, right? I've learned, hey, don't wait till the last minute um, to finish a project. I am notorious for, well, not notorious. I have learned, if I have to create something, let's see, I was creating a lesson. So I have a background in teaching high school. So I was creating a high school lesson for a friend. And instead of waiting to the last minute to complete that creation of the product, I sent her a draft 3 days before it was due. I was like, hey, just want you to get your take on what I've got here. What do you think? So I've learned to send samples, send a draft, do a little bit of intermediate before. That helps me that keeps me from waiting until the very last minute to get something done. Okay. And then, of course, getting help early. Um, I've learned that the minute I get stuck, I need to reach out to someone for help. That may be my boss, that may be a colleague, that may be a friend, that may be my spouse, just to say, "Hey, I'm stressed and I'm stuck. Can you help me like process through this so that I'm not going to be stressed or stuck anymore?" And of course, your friends love you, your family loves you. They're going to be there for you. But this is a great lesson I've learned from things that I did, mistakes that I made, that I've learned to process through them. Man, some good life lessons there with things that I did wrong originally. But I hope that gives you some ideas on this essay. We just kind of brainstormed, okay? Food for thought, really, to kind of get the juices flowing in your brain as you get ready um, to write some of these essay type things. Okay, let's go to the third and final one I'm gonna do with you today. And this one is, let's take a look at it. So this essay is a little bit different because it's not asking you to create data, a representation, visual representations of data, but instead it's asking you, how are you going to avoid misrepresenting data? And I think it's a good line of thought. Let's look at the very first part question that I see here that just says, what will you do to ensure that your data that you represent data accurately? So the first thing here is that I'm going to make sure Well, let's see, how to represent data accurately. So I think the first thing is we've got to make sure that we follow all of the guidelines. We make sure that we label everything, title the graph or the chart. That gives our viewer more information about what the data is that they're looking at. You know, if I just give you a graph, you may be looking at my kid's lemonade stand profits, right? Or you may be looking at a $1 million company's profit statements. There's a big difference, right? But if I don't label anything and I don't title that graph or chart, you have no idea what you're looking at. And so I think in order to be well representing our data, we need to make sure that we've labeled, we've titled everything, um, and that we present it in a way that is easy to follow. I'm going to use simple, right? Like, why overcomplicate things? We want to keep it as simple as possible. And if we can do that with our data, then our client, our customer, our reader, whoever is going to interact with this on the other side of it, has the best chance to be able to understand what it is we're trying to convey. Okay, so let's move on to the next question, which is, how will your data, how will you help people correctly interpret your data? Well, I think part of that we just talked about a little bit, but we'll add a few things. How to help people correctly interpret your data. I think the labeling helps. I think presenting the data in a manner that is simple and easy to follow. I might add also include a key. If you're going to use abbreviations or any symbols, you want to make sure that those are clearly defined in your data and your visual representation. It's going to help people to be able to clearly get what it is the data is saying. And I think maybe for our last piece here, I'm going to use examples from the business world. I think I'm going to use my lemonade stand and my $1 million company. So let me kind of put some ideas of that down here. So without, maybe I'll do it here, without labels and a title, a customer, well, what should we use? Consumer? A person will not know what information the visual representation is communicating, right? They might be looking at the profits for a lemonade stand. Sorry, I just had to, I thought that was funny. Lemonade stand or a multi-million-dollar company. They simply do not know without clearly defined graphs, maybe or charts. Okay. And again, that's the whole idea that we're trying to communicate good information. And we want to do it in a way that makes it easy to understand. Like, there's nothing worse than having this graph, and while it's colored great and everything, but we have no clue what that graph or chart is trying to say. Um, it becomes useless, right? So I love this idea of making it simple. Keep it simple and easy to follow for the person who's going to be looking at it. So it just makes it more approachable, right? So I hope this helps. I haven't done this before with the sessions. I haven't done one that breaks down kind of the essay like questions for the assessment, but I hope this gives you some ideas to talk about in these kind of essays. We really just did some bullet points that would help you kind of get some ideas. Like I said, get some ideas flowing for each of these three essays. Um, and I don't know what essay you're going to get, but I think that the brainstorming has always helped me with writing, just kind of putting some bullet points down, organizing my thoughts before I sit down to write it. Again, that always helps me as well. So thanks so much for your time. Oh, as promised, let me bring back those live lecture quiz answers. Almost forgot about that. So let me put those up. There we go. As promised, there are the live lecture quiz answers. Um, if you need something, please feel free to let me know. I'd be happy to either meet with you, create a video, something of that nature to kind of break down something that we've been talking about, a concept. But other than that, thanks for so much for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Bye for now.